To me, it just really just came like a lightning bolt, when I was 26 years old and I was working at the time, and I would go to daily mass. So during my lunch break, I went to a chapel in downtown Houston and went for mass. And all of a sudden it just hit me like a lightning bolt, where I felt that Christ was calling me to follow him in the priesthood, And if there's ever a time when we need priests, it's now. I wrestled with it a little bit because I had already had all these plans, and I had to let go of those plans. So there was a little bit of an interior struggle there for several days. And then by God's grace, I saw the beauty of the call. I realized that the Lord was going to fulfill all my deepest desires. And so then I said yes. After that, of course, it was like figuring all the practical details out. I had to tell my parents. By this point, I don't know if I should say this, but I was on like every matrimonial website, that's out there. 26-year-old guy, So, I had to tell my parents. Everybody had to change gears all of a sudden. It was a little bit dramatic. I eventually left my job after about another year. I moved to Chicago so I could be, close to the diocese there and close to other people in Jesus Youth who could help me out. And and then I started doing my philosophy studies, and kind of went along from there.
When you received the call to priesthood, is that the time when you came to faith, or did you have like a faith journey even before that?
I think sometimes it's easy to assume that like a person's, once I got the call to the priesthood, I started taking the faith seriously. Meaning not just for me, but for anybody. But really, it's not the case at all. Mm-hmm. The call to the priesthood was just a continuation of the faith journey. Mm-hmm. My faith journey began when I was 14, and I experienced, the love of Jesus in my life, and I made a dramatic change in my life at that point. And as I was growing up in the faith, I wanted to give my whole life and my entire future in whatever way I wanted to give it for the Lord.
How did your family, how did the situations you were in New Jersey help you grow in faith and all that? Can you tell a little bit about that?
As a teenager, I was rebellious, in a way. I really believed in just trying to be myself, express myself, and things like that. I think the beauty for me was that when I came to encounter Christ, I didn't feel like I needed to change that. I felt like I could still express myself and be myself as a teenager. I was very much into the sort of the hip-hop subculture and things like that growing up. None of that I never found it to be incompatible with my faith, It was actually like, oh great, I can express my faith in that particular subculture, in that kind of music and things like that. And that's how I grew up in the faith, and
Can you tell us a little bit about your seminary life? What were some of the beautiful things that you learned in seminary? What were some of the hard things that you have to get through in seminary life?
For me personally, the real blessing of seminary was being in solitude with the Lord. It was this time of going like deep in with Jesus. It would just really deeply, transform me. The Lord was transforming me. The silent retreats. At one point, I got to do a 30-day silent retreat, which was just life-changing, extremely powerful. For me, I would say one of the greatest challenges of seminary formation was coming into this idea that you are a public person. That's what they would tell us, from the very beginning of seminary. You're becoming a public person. And I'm like, what does that mean? Am I like becoming a politician or something? It was a little uneasy for me. But over time, I realized that what's meant by that is, as a priest, you are also an official representative of Christ and of the church. It turns out when I really came to understand it more deeply and theologically and spiritually, I fell in love with it. Initially, though, it just kind of frightened me a little bit. Like, what does that mean? You know? So there was a growing process there in terms of, understanding that. So for me, it was learning how to really be myself, but also be generous in terms of, being a public person in that way. So,
what experiences have shaped you spiritually all through those years?
Yeah, all throughout this journey, all throughout my entire journey of faith, but particularly in the priestly journey, the relationship with Mary has been such a profound aspect in the entire journey. It's just amazing. The way Mary can lead you deeper and deeper into the mysteries of our faith and into a deeper relationship with the whole church. So for me, like, the priesthood is like, she is the companion to the priest. I attribute everything in a way to her. I entrust everything to her when it comes to the priesthood.
Reminds me of John Paul II, Totus Tuus,
That's right.
Entrusted everything to Mary.
Yeah, well, now that you mention, St. John Paul II.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, he was still alive, and even then, he's alive. I would have like a picture of him, in my room, and I used to just look into his eyes, and there was this holiness that radiated from him, which would tell me. And now, remember, back then, I'm not thinking about the priesthood. It's nothing to do with the priesthood. It's just I saw in him somebody who believed in young people, like who had hope that as a young man that I could do something, that I could be something, that I could strive for holiness, that I could become a saint. And so when he died, I cried like a baby. I was in college at the time. It was heartbreaking for me. I was almost like a little upset at God, like, how could you take him away from us? The one person who could really see that and have that sense of hope. But of course, the way God works is it's always greater, the way he leads us is into always greater.
Right.
So after he died, John Paul has accompanied me in a powerful way. So
what was your discernment like in terms of joining the St. Thomas Syro Malabar Diocese of Chicago?
Yeah. When I would say probably when I was in college, I just started really falling in love with the Syro Malabar liturgy. Hearing the prayers, really when it was in English, where I can understand it. And the way that some priests would celebrate the Qurbana with just such simple reverence and the mysteries, I was just really drawn to it. And this is kind of crazy because me being in college is like 2004 to 2008. Okay. Well, back then I somehow got a copy of the Syro Malabar, divine praises, the Liturgy of the Hours, the prayers that priests say during the day.
Yeah.
I somehow found an English copy of it back then. And in college, I used to pray them. I used to pray the Liturgy of the Hours of the Syro Malabar Church because I was just so drawn to the beauty of the liturgy. So for me, really, it's the liturgy itself that actually drew me to the Syro Malabar Church. When it came to the priesthood, there was another important factor, which is, who is my bishop? My bishop was and is Bishop Jacob. So whatever path I go on, I wanted it to be, in obedience to him. And I remember telling Bishop Jacob, like early in one of our first meetings, that he was always so good at listening and spending plenty of time to hear me out. And I remember telling him, St. Ignatius of Antioch says that priests are like strings on the harp of the bishop. And he was praising them for the harmony. And I said, that's how I view the priesthood. We're strings on the harp of the bishop. It's together, in obedience to the bishop, that a priest can fulfill his mission.
For me, the priesthood is not something that I can earn or attain. It's not something that I find myself worthy of, but something that the Lord Jesus has called me to and that He confers upon me as a gift. I recognized His call when I was in my mid-20s, but the Lord had in fact called me from before I was born. He knew me, and He set me apart for this vocation. As I enter into it now, I feel myself totally complete, and I know that this is what I was made for.